Hi all, I never expected such a reaction from the pronunciation video. It got about 160 comments so far. It's actually pronunciation, not pronunciation, as I incorrectly pronounced it. That's a bit of a common error, actually. There's a web page with common English errors. The verb to pronounce is N-O-U-N, but pronunciation is P-R-O-N-U-N, and that was picked up on by 3 or 4 of you actually so far, so that's very good to clear that up. I thought I'd use this second part of the series, I think we could make it a series, to look at some common middle game and post-mortem terms. So you might not use these during an actual game. Some of them you do actually, but some of them could be in post-mortem analysis. So basically, another prop game. This was another consultation game where a grandmaster of consultation chess, Faller. So I'm pronouncing that Faller. That might be wrong actually. So he was playing white, and he kicked off with D4. Now, on the subject of TH words, some of you in the past have chosen to pick on my use of the word the. So the, I think the old English term was the. You can sometimes not be in such a tongue twist. You can say the very quickly. You don't need to do these acrobatic movements with your tongue. You can just say the. It's acceptable in different parts of the country, of the United Kingdom anyway, England, and various parts of England have different ways of saying and pronouncing words. So within the country, yeah, depending if you go up north, it's said slightly differently. But there's also some often confusion with fawn porn. I'm not saying F-A-W-N, I'm saying T-H-O-R-N, fawn porn, fawn porn. It's just the TH, you don't really, if you can choose or not to do acrobatics with your tongue. It's not mandatory. There isn't an EU legislation for this just yet, that you must say with the. You don't have to do that, or fawn porn, or Faller. So anyway, clearing those TH words up. So let's see, the team actually chose to play very materialistically in this game. It started off as though it was going to be a Nimzo, then G3 happened, D5, and then the team decided to munch the first pawn. So this is another disastrous consultation game coming up. And the team has actually got quite a few players who did actually consult with engines. The rules on these consultation games are not so strict as normal rules, because it's very difficult to enforce against people using engines in the crowd, in the mob. And with vote changing, it seems the engine mobs were sort of magnetized immediately to the site, because all of a sudden they gained huge influence that they could change people's votes. So once you introduce the idea of being able to change votes, the masters, they started losing actually. But this was one of the very rare exceptions where, okay, this was an ICCF correspondence grandmaster Faller, and they're used to using engines intensively. There's no rules about that in ICCF correspondence chess. So actually he's using a kind of idea, a very dynamic idea from other I think correspondence grandmasters in the past, in this Catalan system, to sacrifice pawns for dynamic play. So knight c3, and it looks as though white is going to be playing for e4 and e5 soon. In fact, this is the case. The team decided to sort of hold on to that c4 pawn, but already some damage has been done to black's position here. And now another pawn sacrifice, which I've actually seen in an over the board recently. Mr. I.M. Bates, Master Bates, was sitting next to me at the London Classic, and he was white, and I think it was a very similar position to this, where he had also sacrificed his D pawn as well as the C pawn. So this is a very powerful Catalan kind of idea, very dynamic. So the other middle game terms, getting back to the pronunciation issues, is, well, the first word we could look at is Zwischenzug. Now, I've got a crib sheet which I'll give you in the description of this video. Apparently, it's supposed to be something like this. Now, apologies to if this is disrespectful to any Germans or Italians or French, these pronunciation videos. No offence is intended. In fact, you will know from my choice of players that I'm fairly neutral as far as choosing players of a particular country. If anything in chess, we should be respecting, Russian grandmasters, because they have dominated the game of chess with many, many world champions. But I'm pretty country neutral. Where there's talent, there's interesting games and there's interesting players. And terminology, yes, has been influenced French, Italian, German. So Zwischenzug, Zwischenzug, I think that might be close to how it's pronounced, but I'm not really sure. Zwischenzug, maybe there's a wiki page, but basically now I say it like Zwischenzug because I'm sort of trying to say it how it's spelled, Zwischenzug, and the back of it, Zug, reminds me of bug. As a programmer, Zwischenzug has got kind of connotation of a kind of bug, I suppose, but it's an in-between move. So when you don't have to do an ordinary like recapture, and if it's not 5-minute chess, you might have time to think about routine decisions, the number of Zwischenzugs would go up. So here clearly, okay, it wasn't mandatory for black to take on d4 here, but the team decided to take on d4. Another German term, you could say it Zugzwang if you want to follow the letters. Zugzwang, it looks like that. Now, Wang would actually show respect to some of the top Chinese players, because there's a few Wangs at the top of the Chinese rating list. So, okay, so how is Zugzwang meant to be pronounced? From my crib sheet, apparently Zugzwang, Zugzwang, Zugzwang. Now, I'm sure Annie K, she has promised on her channel, which I'll also give a link in the description, she has promised to also cover these terms. At the moment, her focus has been on player names, but I think it's important to address these middle game terms for the correct pronunciation. I guess they are around on Wiki anyway. So maybe it's Zugzwang, 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 and Zwischenzug, maybe Zwischenzug, Zwischenzug, Zwischenzug. Okay, so let's go on. Now also, let's go on to some French words. Unfortunately, there isn't an en passant in this game, but I would say en passant, in passing. En, in, passant, 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 en passant, in passing. And that was kind of sort of to address the outrage of the pawn moving 2 squares instead of just the ordinary 1 square, that en passant came to being, because in the old rules I think it was only 1 square, and then the rule exception, the pawn moving 2 squares. Now if I'm wrong about that, please feel free to correct me. So en passant, now apparently it's supposed to be, I think I was almost close actually already, en passant. So yeah, en passant. I think you can be quiet at the ends of en passant. I don't think you have to say en passant. It's almost like saying peasant, en peasant. So I think en passant is acceptable, but apparently here on the crib sheet, en, as in en passant. I don't know about the T at the end. And I do have a certificate in French from ages ago, so I should be better on the French words. Now here is another one, en preez. This pawn was en preez. Hanging. It was hanging on d4 and it was taken. So en preez. Now there's a P-R-E-E-Z. I'm not really convinced about saying that Z. I think I would say it's silent, en preez, but maybe I'm wrong. No, I think actually I have been corrected on this in the past, and it should be en preez, but I don't know. En preez, it doesn't seem quite right to me to say that that Z bit at the end. I kind of think it's more nicer to almost, make that silent, en preez. and I'm pretty sure I've heard that made silent, because on the English spelling ENPRISE, you know, I wouldn't expect the E to be making much of a noise. So on pre, but maybe it is on preez, on preez, on preez. Okay, another one is jadoob, jadoob, and apparently this is on the crib sheet. It should be zadoob, 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 zadoob. Now, if you don't want to say that in an over-the-board game, you do want to adjust a piece, you could say just I adjust, because actually that's what it means, I adjust. Adoob is I abbreviating adoob, jadoob, jadoob. So there we have it. Some other pronunciation of words to think about. I guess the debate is unlikely to ever parallel the initial debate on the old fianchetto, fianchetto. But that was actually especially interesting, because apparently there are some sources, and my little poll last night at the club, people were saying fianchetto. They didn't really they didn't seem that bothered by fianchetto. I'm not really sure. I think a lot of UK players, really, I'm convinced a lot of UK players do say fianchetto. And it's kind of nicer, because also you've got to bear in mind there are some swear words in English with the k, which I'm not going to say because I want to keep this a family friendly video. But when you use the sharp words like f or k, they're often the basis for aggressive swear words. So there's this idea of and some of the philosophers on the comments of the previous video did say you know, relativism or was it the source of the words? Do you expect the source, respect the source of the words, or relative to your locale? Now, another way of saying that is strategic choice versus technological determinism, and basically, you know, if there's an adaptation, an anglicization, you could call it an anglicization of words based on how they're spelled. Sometimes that does sort of respect local cultural issues and concerns, and the avoidance of sharp sounding words might make to some, and many in fact, the use of fianchetto much more acceptable than fianchetto, because a lot of hard sounding words are the basis of swear words in English. Now, that wasn't brought up in the comments, but I thought I would bring it up here. That might be one of the bases for why fianchetto is used. But my own personal basis is that I like cello, C-E-L-L-O, cello. And that reminds me of for some reason of Mozart. So fianchetto. I'm tempted to avoid using fianchetto, but despite the pressure experienced by some on YouTube to correct me on that, but that's an old story. So here, anyway, the team played rook f6, and note there's a kind of fawn pawn here, fawn, T-H-O-R-N. I could always spell it out, I suppose, but fawn, fawn, and again, okay, you don't really want to say that too much, because that's the basis of another swear word, which I'm not going to mention. But this fawn pawn was very dangerous. So rook e1 actually threatens. Now rook takes e6 and then mating on e7, and here the team decided that enough was enough, and they resigned. Now this is a team getting this arrangement of pieces. So if a team can do this to their position, don't feel bad when this happens to you in a game. So what is the engine analysis here? This was a bit of a disaster game. The engine analysis is creeping up, and now it's gone to 3 to 6. So basically the threat of rook e6 is difficult to parry. Let's say knight c5 as an example. Then queen f6 threatens mate. Let's say b5, now check. And let's say bishop d7, now we've got queen e7 mate. So I don't think there's any way to defend this position. That big threat of rook e6 is fairly crushing. Let's say queen c5, rook takes e6, king d8, trying to crawl out. Now simply rook b e1, keeping the threat now. In fact, there's a threat, I think, fret is another one, threat or fret. Now, that there is a point now about F-R-E-T almost being implied if you say fret. So you should really say fret. fret with the tongue, you know, to emphasize the th. This is a very common concern. So fret, fret, fret. Okay, it's just sometimes a shorthand to say fret, because the implication is there. If you're pointing at the chessboard anyway, there's a kind of implication you are talking about threat, because a lot of things are also in context. You know, strategic choice versus technological determinism. You know, just because there's technology, you know, like mobile phones, doesn't mean you have to get a mobile phone, but there's going to be increasing peer pressure to adopt the technology eventually, because the number of adopters increases the peer pressure, and eventually it does almost appear as though there is technological determinism, and it's only people that want to be different that are making strategic choices, maybe sometimes not to adopt the technology, that they're standing up against the crowd. So here anyway, what is the major threat? Okay, so let's say we give black a null move. Apparently it's bishop h3 is the subtle thing going on. So let's say a5 is an experiment. Queen takes f8. So bishop h3 does close up d7 for this rook e8 mate. So that's pretty brutal as well. That actually, who would have thought that in this position, bishop h3 is the crushing move with a forced mate in 12, apparently, after bishop h3. H is another one, by the way. I think it's bad to say H. You can just say H. Okay, but anyway, we're moving a bit too broad in scope there. So so here, I don't know. There's not really too many defences. So I don't know. Let's move the bishop. Actually, it's instead of b5, we can't move the bishop. So there's not really much black can do. There's no rook move. Let's rule that out. The knight's kind of, well, let's say d3. Again, I think bishop h3 is the killer move. It really implies this queen sack. Queen takes f8 and rook e8. The king stranded on d8 is typical of the symptoms of computer chess sometimes. That computers don't mind very, very, very difficult to play positions, because they've gone under the premise of trying to play the most scientifically correct move at every point. Even if that seemed to be gobbling pawns after pawn to be playing the position, but with the king stranded in the centre, it's not really good news later on at the end of the day. So this was, I think, you know, basically someone very, very experienced at using engines, basically GM Fowler, and very, very experienced at using very good dynamic openings. So basically, let's do an overview and summary of the game, and review the terms as well. So we had Zwischenzug, or you could just say Zwischenzug, or Zwischenzug. So Zugzwang, or you could say Zugzwang, or you could say en passant, which I think is almost close to how it's supposed to be said anyway, but I'm sure you'll correct me on these. So en passant, but it depends. Do you want to actually say the last bit, or you could say en passant, as though the T is almost silent. En preez, or you could say en preez. Maybe that's correcter to say the Z, almost say the Z, en preez. So yeah, please do, you know, stir up a debate. That was fun last time. Zadoob, maybe it's Zadoob. But look at the crib sheet. Maybe some of you will even disagree with the crib sheet that I've got from somewhere. Apparently it's Zadoob. Okay, Zadoob. But I would say, you know, Zadoob. Okay. So this was a dynamically played game where, okay, maybe it seemed convincing every turn to play the best possible move and to win this material, but the material does seem to be ill-gotten gains when the king's kind of stranded in the centre, and a move like bishop f8 has to be played to defend g7. So it seems that white has okay, material is less, but clearly with the queen also going to a7, you might think that these moves are kind of a little bit suspect, that look at white's pieces controlling, you know, key squares and a lot of pressure on the black position. So this kind of gambit seems to be very, very strong. Bishop d4 prompting another weakness, this c5, you know, weakening d6, creating a fawn, or you could say fawn. Now that is a bit naughty because there's almost an implication of fawn, I must admit. So bishop takes d6, e takes d6, and we have a fawn pawn. C takes d4, so that's sacrificing a whole piece. But now there's some really killer threats, which are quite subtle, to do with the fawn pawn being the winning element of the position. So rook f8, rook e1 threatening, rook takes e6 and queen e7 mate. Knight, and here black resigns. I'm going to delete the rest of the moves from the analysis just in case there's some confusion. But black actually resigned here. Okay. So the principal threat is basically well, queen c5 as we saw, rook takes e6 here, and rook e1. And in this position, even though it's black's turn, that's the power of the white position here with this supported fawn pawn, that actually white can leisurely just create that mating net with cutting across d7 with the killer move bishop h3, it seems. Whatever black does, bishop h3 then threatens queen takes f8. So this is actually quite a brilliant final position to study. If any of you weren't convinced that there was absolutely no defence being a piece up, I mean, this is depth 11. It's now it's creeping up. b6 as though there was some promise for b6. Again, bishop h3 rears its head. Mate in 9, forced mate in 9. You can't disagree with these hash numbers now. Mate in 9. So queen takes d6 is not particularly pleasant to give up the queen for nothing. We don't need to investigate that. Queen c6, an alternative, it seems. So what's happened here? Queen c6 does actually offer a protection of e8 on the queen sack. Now here, so queen takes f8 actually for some now doesn't work. Black will be better. So now here instead, queen g5 check. f6. Let's see what alternatives were there to f6. If knight f6, that doesn't really help matters. Queen takes, and then a mate. So basically, this is a killer check, and after f6, queen g7. So it makes sure e7 has got access from the side, and now black. The moves presented are queen takes d6, offering the queen, or queen h1, which don't seem particularly palatable moves to have to play. So anything else is getting mated fairly shortly. So that's the power of a fawn pawn on d6 combined with a battery against e8. So that was initially kicked off by the sacrifice of 2 pawns down a piece, and the black king stranded in the centre. Hope you enjoyed the game. I'll put the pronunciation crib sheet in the description of the video. Hope you enjoy this new series. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.